you're going to be on these pills for the rest of your life, so get used to it. The number one killers, cardiovascular disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, and also mental health issues. The real wake up for me was that realizing that the pills and the surgery didn't treat the underlying condition, but just removed the symptoms. And the disease progressed, largely driven by nutritional choices. We now realize that lifestyle may be the most important thing we do for our health. The point is, it can eliminate the need for the prescription medicine.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Joan Ifland here. Thanks so much for joining me with these conversations about how to recover from processed foods. And today I have an amazing guest. I am so privileged to be here with Dr. Robert Lufkin. He has written a book which will blow your socks off. It is The Lies I Taught in Medical School. In the next half hour or so, you are going to be lifted from the burden of deception. You know that many of you have been to doctor visits, and these are good-hearted, well-educated people, including my own daughter, who have been educated in ideas that we know are just not true. So let's just say hello to Dr. Lufkin. My plan for this is he's written not a mountain of a book, it's a mountain range of a book. So we're going to be hitting the summits of these mountains. I can't encourage you enough to get this book. You are going to run and get it. It's coming out June 4th. Yeah. But I would encourage you to go to Amazon and pre-order it. All right. So Dr. Lufkin, to start us off, how this process of realizing that what you were taught and what you were teaching is not true in all cases. How was that to come upon that realization?
Yeah. Before I do that, let me just say, Joan, it's a pleasure and an honor being on your program. I'm a huge fan of your work. So you're very kind to have me on the show. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I guess I want to preface what I say by saying I'm a product of the medical establishment. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I've spent my entire career as a medical school professor at leading medical schools in Southern California. I've written hundreds of peer-reviewed scientific papers. My lab has gotten millions of dollars in grants from the federal government, from drug companies, so I basically was doing I am the medical establishment. I also want to go on record in saying that I believe that Western medicine is unequaled for many things it does. Certainly the transformation of infectious disease and public health in the 20th century, it transformed humanity and mankind and was so powerful. And, if I happen to walk outside and God forbid I get hit by a bus,
you just want to be in that hospital.
A lifestyle is important, but, and it certainly lifestyle will improve the way I recover. But in order to save my life, I need acute interventions like blood transfusions, bone settings, and all those things. Yeah. So,
Dr. Lufkin, I just want to reinforce what you just said. And I want everybody to know that I have asthma, childhood trauma. And if I didn't have a Western invented inhaler, I wouldn't be able to do my life. So nothing we're going to talk about here is to interfere with your going and getting the medical attention that you need under all circumstances.
Yeah. So then the question may be, why are we even having this conversation? And what were the lies? Well, the problem, in my opinion, is when these fixes, which are pills and surgery largely, for acute interventions are then applied to a range of chronic diseases, which are now reaching epidemic proportions in our society, unequaled in human history, even corrected for population. So, and by that I mean, obesity, diabetes, hypertension.
93% of Americans have a diet-related diagnosis. This is data coming out of Tufts Nutrition School this year. 93%. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, and for me, the wake up call was I personally came down with 4 chronic diseases. I went to my doctors and they gave me prescriptions for them. And, I said something about lifestyle and they said, well, you could try it, but really you're going to be on these pills for the rest of your life. So get used to it. And at that point, I began to question what they were saying and what many of my colleagues still believe. And I realized that there's a large body of research that, includes your work and others showing that these chronic diseases and, adding to the list is the number one killers that will determine likely yours, mine, and all of our audience's lifespan. And that is, cardiovascular disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, and also mental health issues. But the real wake up for me was that realizing that the pills and the surgery in most cases didn't treat the underlying condition, but just remove the symptoms. And so the disease progressed. And what does treat the underlying causes? Well, for a lot of them, they're based on, in my opinion, metabolic abnormalities related to inflammation, insulin resistance, largely driven by, nutritional choices that we would probably talk about. But the point is, the point is, by reversing these lifestyle changes, it can eliminate the need for the prescription medicines, which is what happened in my case. And in many cases, people are able to lower their prescription medicines or even reverse them. And I'm certainly not recommending anyone stop their prescriptions. This is something that needs to be done, in coordination with your doctor as you go through these things. But the message isn't getting out there, I think, of the importance of lifestyle. And it's a new era in medicine for all of us where we get to take control of our health rather than the doctor just giving us a pill and surgery. And that's what we do. Instead, we have agency. We're the CEO of our own health. Doctors can't make us healthy. They can just make us less sick. And if I want to be healthy, I need to, every morning I wake up, I get to choose what I eat, when I eat, and other lifestyle choices as well.
All right. You are so on target. This is the song that we sing in our recovery communities. In the 6 years that we've had
with your work.
the ARC, I've just seen so many quote unquote incurable conditions go into remission, full remission. And I love that you're touching on the mental issues because we know the processed foods cripple cell function. Rob Lustig has shown us that. And so that's the fun of this. You get off the processed foods, and then and Dr. Lufkin's going to go through the diseases that he knows are fixable. I won't say curable, but fixable. So let's do this. I'm going to, I have to say that I wait to read this book in detail because I know these headlines and to learn like the details of all the mechanisms of why these diseases go into remission through lifestyle. I just can't wait. But let's go through this. The obesity lie. So what is the obesity lie that you taught, and what do you feel is the truth?
Well, there are a number of lies that are still believed by my colleagues and many people in the field that are still taught in medical schools around the country. One is that a calorie is just a calorie. If you want to lose weight, just exercise more and eat fewer calories. And that exercising doesn't work to lose weight. Exercise works up an appetite. And we know from macronutrients, as your audience knows, fat, proteins, the essential macronutrients, have a very different effect on insulin, and which is the fat storage hormone, than carbohydrates, which are non-essential macronutrients. And so depending on which combination of those I eat, my insulin will be stimulated very differently and my weight gain will be affected very differently.
Yeah, and we know that your brain will be very differently affected. The refined carbohydrates, the body is just interpreting them as drugs, and creating cravings for them. So that is a huge lie. And it is remarkable that so many people still buy into it, that a calorie is a calorie. And then we have evidence coming along that reduced calorie dieting without doing what Dr. Lufkin is suggesting, which is going over to real foods. If you just reduce calories, but you keep eating processed foods, you will regain the weight. And you can develop a deeper obsession. The cravings can get worse, and you can wake up your fear of famine brain, which then creates just a new level of compulsion. If you chronically don't eat enough, you wake up your survival brain. Right, I love this. And the next one, I'm so grateful to you. The diabetes lie. What's the diabetes lie?
Wow, that's a huge one. In my opinion, by diabetes, I'm going to be referring to type 2 diabetes, which is over 90% of the cases of the epidemic we're facing now. It used to be called adult onset diabetes, but sadly, it's now occurs in children as well. And there's a small genetic component to all these diseases, but the fact that they're exploding now means that something in the environment is driving them. And with diabetes, with type 2 diabetes, we know it's a problem with insulin and insulin resistance, and foods that drive insulin, the carbohydrates that we talked about, make diabetes worse. And you can reverse your type 2 diabetes in most patients by lowering the carbohydrates, and it's really remarkable. But yet you have the American Diabetic Association saying that they have recipes on their website with sugar in them, which is a carbohydrate and drives insulin. And they say, oh, don't worry about it, just cover it with insulin. And I think this is misleading. This is harmful. And it doesn't do people good. And the idea that controlling my diabetes with insulin, it's not really curing the diabetes, and the downstream effects of diabetes, the complications, which is the number one cause of amputations, number one cause of renal failure, number one cause of blindness, cancer, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's disease, mental illness, hypertension, all those things are much greater in diabetics. So, and these things largely don't slow down and don't stop, even if your glucose is well controlled with insulin, because insulin itself has harmful effects that drives metabolic switches like mTOR and other things in a very negative way.
Right. And the nightmare of Alzheimer's being a factor in insulin dysregulation. So I have such a vivid story about what you're talking about. At one point in my career, I owned a prepared meal company that regulated glucose through the food. I was out in a corporation giving samples. A fellow came and got a meal, and a couple of hours later, he came back. He had the most shocked look on his face. He had been battling a losing battle with diabetes type 2 for 20 years. And his diabetes educator was telling him to eat bread. Well, he came out with that shocked look on. He's got a pump. He's taking his numbers every hour. My numbers have been stable for the last 3 years, 3 hours. What the heck is this? And I was able to explain to him how you can regulate glucose through your meal combinations with unprocessed foods. And he was shocked. We have to remember that the diabetes educators are educated by the dietitians who are educated by the processed food industry. All right, we are on to something here. How about the fatty liver lie?
That's fatty liver is a fascinating disease. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is a condition that didn't exist before 1980. It's a completely new disease. And before 1980, the most common cause of fatty liver was alcoholic fatty liver disease from alcohol, because the liver is a detoxifying organ. Alcohol is a toxin. It gets detoxified by the liver. Well, in the 1980s, something happened and this new disease appeared. There was fatty liver, but it occurred in people who didn't drink alcohol. And to give you an idea of the impact, this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, this new mysterious unknown disease, now is the #1 cause of liver failure and liver transplants worldwide. So it's replaced everything else. And many experts, the lie is, well, we don't know what causes it, lose
That's
weight,
the lie.
and this kind of thing. And that's still being taught at leading medical centers this year. But Robert Lustig, who you referenced earlier from UC San Francisco, pediatric endocrinologist there, has done some amazing work, and others showing that fructose, which is one of the sugars that your audience is familiar with, that's found in fruit. Unlike glucose, which is the other major sugar, which is metabolized by all the cells of the body, fructose is not. It's not metabolized by a small percentage in the gut, but the rest of it goes to the liver and is handled by the liver because it's a toxin, basically. And what happens when the liver handles, ethanol or fructose? They have similar metabolic pathways. It creates fatty liver. And even though fructose doesn't raise insulin itself, it drives insulin resistance and drives inflammation, drives type 2 diabetes. It also increases urate, which drives gout and has all sorts of problems. And then downstream effects the endothelial glycocalyx with nitric oxide synthetase. And nitric oxide is a key molecule, not only for the blood vessels, but also for the brain and for the immune system.
It just seems like it'd be so simple. You referenced the year 1980. That is the year when high fructose corn syrup came on the market.
Yeah.
It's high fructose corn syrup. It's high fructose corn syrup. Why can't they just say, and Rob has published on this, that incredible article, high fructose corn syrup, alcohol without the buzz. It's the name of the paper. Be so easy for doctors to teach.
And he actually, in a prospective controlled study, I love this study he did with children with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. He basically isocalorically changed their diet. So he kept the calories the same. And all he did was substitute the fructose in their diet for glucose. So they were eating the same amount of calories, but just no fructose. And basically in a matter of weeks, he was able to reverse the fatty liver disease to the point where you could actually see the difference on medical imaging, which is pretty dramatic.
Oh my gosh. I mean, Dr. Lufkin, it's such a nightmare out there, to think of a child facing a liver transplant rather than just getting the fructose out of their diet.
Yeah.
So thank you. I mean, this is a valuable book. I want everyone to go and get this book. Okay, the hypertension lie. What's the hypertension lie?
Well, hypertension is an interesting condition. It's becoming so common now. It's one of the epidemics. Almost half of adults have high blood pressure or hypertension. And a lot of it is considered essential hypertension. We don't know what causes it. There's some talk about salt or other things like that. But, as you well know, there's a metabolic basis for hypertension, that abnormal metabolism is a driver for hypertension. And when we fix our metabolism with a metabolically healthy diet, getting rid of the junk food, an interesting thing happens across the board. People's blood pressure drops no matter what.
It could happen in the first 24 hours.
Exactly. And so the lie is that, hypertension is best treated with drugs. And I think, if you have a hypertensive crisis, super high blood pressure, take a drug to get it down. But long-term lifestyle will manage it to the point where you actually reverse the disease and your blood vessels heal and get better, and you don't get progression.
I just love that you said that. Not only do you stop the symptoms, but any damage. Also, the body's capability of healing itself, it never really goes away. It's a blueprint. It's the factory blueprint. It's there. And if you take these burdens off, That's what I really love about your book is it should give people hope that they don't have to bear the label anymore. Oh, I'm hypertensive. I have high blood pressure, and to identify themselves that, oh, I'm diabetic. Those labels you can take those off. All right, I love this. I love this. I love this. The cardiovascular disease lie. Tell us about that.
There are a few lies. We talk about the sort of the myth of the low fat diet as being a healthy diet for cardiovascular health, and we talk about reasons why and the evidence and how we got here. And we also talk about chasing blood fats like LDL and using statins. Even that statins are problematic. They do some good, but there are problems with them, and there are alternatives. And for heart disease, cardiovascular disease, there are greater risk factors than LDL cholesterol, which is the blood fat. So in my opinion, you're more likely to get drive heart disease and have a heart attack from eating junk food than you are from eating fat or saturated fat.
Yes.
And by junk food, I mean carbohydrates, like a donut versus a, hamburger without the bun, of course, because the bun has carbohydrates in it. But,
processed foods.
Processed foods.
I saw it on the Nutrition Network. I saw the doctoral student who did her work in going back through all the studies purporting to tie fat consumption to heart disease. She was a high-class statistician. She was able to find the mistakes in the data analysis in everyone. Fat does not cause heart disease. I'd wonder if you have any feeling for inflammation in heart disease, because we know that processed foods are very inflammatory.
Yeah, I mean, I think inflammation along with insulin resistance are two of the main drivers resulting from metabolic dysfunction. So inflammation absolutely drives heart disease and all the other chronic diseases that we're going to talk about. I think inflammation is at the root cause.
I'm with you. I'm so with you. And, Rob has got in the metabolical book, he's got the 8 ways that processed foods cripple cell function. Inflammation and insulin resistance are 2 of those 8. All right, let's talk about the cancer lie.
Oh, the cancer lie is interesting. We talk about in the 1960s or early 70s, I think President Richard Nixon famously announced the war on cancer. We were in the middle of the war on Vietnam, and the idea he funded through a bill, the National Cancer Institute. And the idea was to basically provide the funds to eliminate cancer. And many people optimistically believe that this would be taken care of in time for the bicentennial, which was 1976. Well, fast forward, decades. While there have been some
50 years now, 50 years.
Yeah. And while there have been some dramatic breakthroughs in certain types of cancers, if you look at it in the aggregate, and the National Cancer Institute actually recognized this themselves, and they did some programs to do that, they realized that the current approach, which is based largely on gene therapy and genetics and finding things that way. We talk about some of the studies following on the Human Genome Project, which were essentially the Human Cancer Genome Project. It completely failed. It was a bust, and it showed the problems of using genetics to fight cancer. And instead, we talk about an alternative cause, which is again back to metabolic disease, something that Nobel laureate Otto Warburg described in the early part of the 20th century, but was sort of muffled out with a combination of Nazism. He was a gay Jew working in Nazi Germany as a leading scientist, but also the revolution in DNA with Watson and Crick and the double helix. Everyone thought molecular biology was going to be the key, and that drove research in cancer for the next half century, literally.
Yeah.
But now things are turning back to metabolic therapy, and things like nutritional choices going into ketosis now have dramatic effects and are used adjunctively, at least for many cancer treatments. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah. This is, we've done a lot of work in our community with a book called Radical Remission by Kelly Turner, who just went around the world as a doctoral student interviewing people who'd put terminal cancer into remission. She just came up with 10 things they did, and diet is certainly on that list, nutritional supplements, and then all the energy balancing activities, positive thinking and avoiding negative. It's just so, there's so much evidence. I looked at every one of her citations, and now we have a program based on that, but evidence is there. This is not woo-woo. This is really well established in the research. So you can rely on this. Okay, here we go to Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's disease is different than the others because we don't even have a pill for it, really, or surgery. It represents, if you think about it, it represents the ultimate failure of the medical research establishment. I mean, we've had decades of time and virtually unlimited financial resources have been thrown at this, this very serious public health condition. And people have come up with nothing. So in this chapter, we examine why that is, and we look at the whole some of the wrong paths we've gone down, that it may not beta amyloid, while they're present in some, but not all Alzheimer's patients,
not all,
which is the leading model today. If you ask experts on it, we look at other alternative theories, and again, particular dietary choices and lifestyle choices, to the point where ketogenic diets, where people go into ketosis, which is a favorable metabolic state, which you avoiding processed foods to get there. And when you do that, some, but not all patients with Alzheimer's actually experience mental improvement, brain fog goes away, and they get significant effects. Even people taking exogenous ketones, which can do the same, have a similar effect. So it's really, we're undergoing a revolution in our understanding of Alzheimer's disease, to the point that now there are things that we can do. And so that's a very exciting area.
Yes, let's just segue right into the mental health lie.
Mental health was, in many ways, for me, was the most exciting thing. And I strongly reference Chris Palmer's work on his book, Brain Energy, and Georgia Ede, which where they have psychiatric patients hospitalized on medicines, and Chris and others were able to, in some patients, not all of them, but some patients, actually reverse their psychiatric conditions to the point that they got off all medicines. They went home to their families and got a job. And I said, and it's just, he puts them on a ketogenic diet is how he does it. And I love the quote with Chris. I say, hey, Chris, how do you know it's the ketogenic diet? I mean, come on, there's so many other factors. And he goes, well, one, the biology is there, the way we understand it. It's inflammation and, seizures and all those other things. But he said, but the proof's in the pudding. I have Mr. Smith. Has schizophrenia, which means the symptom is you hear voices when patients have schizophrenia. That's the hallmark of it. And he basically, all the voices stopped. He stopped all the medicines. He went home, and I said, well, how do you know it's the ketogenic diet? He says, well, because I was just talking to him, and he says, I know when I start eating processed foods or junk foods, when I eat one, the voices come back and start talking to me again. And it's like schizophrenia is coming back.
It's just what you're saying. We know what the biological mechanism is, that processed foods dysregulate, as we've been saying, cell function, including brain cells.
Yeah.
And it can cause cells to hyperactivate. And then you're hearing voices. All right, here's our last one. Yes, I want everybody to know, if you have any kind of depression, anxiety, irritability, if you're hearing voices, if you have cravings, if you have hyperactive stress levels, cut off the processed foods and see what, if anything, is left. That's like our motto. All right, so longevity is your last lie, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, yeah, in the specific lie we talk about is most people think that aging, and it makes perfect sense. It's like, when my shirt gets old, it wears out. My shoe gets old. My car gets old, it wears out. There's wear and tear. And many people today even still believe that that's the basis for aging and longevity, that our bodies wear out. And we look at why that isn't so, and we look at some radical new ideas and really truly a revolution in longevity, to the point where we, all of us and our audience, will be living significantly longer than our parents or grandparents lived, to the point where, world fertility rates are dropping, catastrophically in Europe and China and Japan. We've all seen that. But interesting, the longevity rates are taking off. So there are fewer people born, but there are fewer people dying too. And now I think, it's personally, I don't think it's unrealistic to think of, a lot of people living to 100. And the way you do it is all the things in the first 10 chapters, looking at dealing with metabolic issues, inflammation, insulin resistance. When you reverse those, all the chronic diseases that cause you to die and determine your longevity are delayed. You can't make everything go away, but at least instead of getting it when you're 50 or, when you're 60, let's get it when you're 90 or 105, and why waste all those years?
Oh my gosh, this is it. People, historically, people have wanted to live long lives, but now people are looking at leading longer lives sick. It's not attractive, but exactly what you're saying. People think they're getting old, but that's not what is happening. Yes, they're getting older, but they're living with this. Americans eat 73% of their food in processed foods. Yeah. They're getting sicker from eating the processed foods. They're not getting sicker because they're getting older. They're getting sicker because they've been on the processed foods one more year, with one more year of damage, with one more year of cell crippling. And that is so much fun. You might be in your 70s, and you're thinking, well, I'm winding down at the end of my life. And then you get off the processed foods, and wow, you feel like you're 50. That's really fun. I want you guys to know that this is fun. It's fun to get off the processed foods. If your cravings are so intense that you can't get off, we have programs now. We have the ARC and the Addiction Reset community. But dang, it is worth trying. Yeah, and then you get the shock doctor. You go to your doctor, your symptoms are going away. Maybe you have a doctor who knows that those things are food related, but maybe you're still looking for that professional. Oh my gosh, Robert, what would you say? What are your closing words? What would you say? Step one is go get the book. Step two is what?
Well, I think the exciting thing is just that we all, like we said, we all get to be in charge of our own lives. As much as I know about medicine, I've studied it, but you as a patient or me as a patient, I know more about my own personal life experience than any doctor will. And increasingly that's going to be important. And we now realize that lifestyle may be the most important thing we do for our health. And the great thing is lifestyle is in our hands. It's our choice. Every morning we wake up, like I said, we get to choose. And for me, that's really empowering. I think we have a future of abundance, love, and the world is a beautiful place to be alive. And we can all look forward to some great times ahead.
Oh my gosh, that is truth incarnate right there. Dr. Lufkin, thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to get this out. I can't wait for people to know just what you're saying. They do have agency, they do have power, and these things are fixable.
Oh,
thank you, and good luck.
Thanks so much, Joan. Thanks. You're very kind, and thanks for having me on the program. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everybody. See you
Bye.
next time. Thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate your interest. Tell the next person. You can walk the next person out of this processed food nightmare with what you learned today. See you next time.